Hi, sixth graders. We're on lesson 4-7. Our learning target is writing percents as decimals and decimals as percents. So you can add this in with your lesson 4-5 and 4-6 notes because they all kind of go together as we're converting between fractions, percents, and decimals. So if we want to go from a percent to a decimal, okay, you probably want to write this down. If we have 7%, we know that we learned in lesson 4-6 that 7% is the same as 7 over 100 because any number with a percent is that number over 100. And then 7/100ths we can write as 0.07. So 7% we just converted to 0.07. If we look at 54%, it's 54 over 100, and then we know that 54 hundredths equals 0.54. If we rewrite if we drop the percent and we write it as 7, okay, we usually don't write it as a whole number with a decimal, but 7 is the same as 7.0. It's just that we always write it as 7. If we move the decimal point over 2 to the left, and we put it right here, and then we fill in our opening with a 0, we end up with 0.07, which is exactly what we just got here. If I do the same with 54%, if I drop my percent, my decimal technically starts right here. If I move it to the left 2, I get 0.54 or 0.54, which is what I just got right here. So to convert from a percent to a decimal, you move the decimal 2 places to the left. Super important to write down and connect 2 places to the left for percent to decimal. Okay, I'll leave this right there so you can still continue to write. So 25%, so basically we drop our percent, okay, kind of cross that off. I know that my percent, if there's not a decimal in the number in the percent, then it's always going to be right after the last number in the percent. So right here, it's after the 5, I go over 2. So 25% is the same as 0.25. 14%, we go over 2, is the same as 0.14. Okay, this is where a lot of people make a mistake. 8%, we start here, we go over 2. We need to plug in a 0 right here. So then 8% is actually 0.08 because 8% is 8/100ths. So we need to make sure we add that 0 to still make it 8/100ths. 0.8 would be 8/10ths, and if we look at 80% and we go over to, we get 0.8. So 8% and 80% are very different numbers. We have to make sure that we move the decimal accordingly. And then 0.5%, this already has a decimal in it, so now we're going to take this decimal and we're going to move it more to the left too. So again, I have to put in a 0 for my openings. So now 0.5% equals 0.005, a very small number. Okay? If we are converting from decimal to percent, if we have 0.4, well, we know that 0.4 is 4/10ths, and we write it as a fraction just like this. 4/10ths is equal to 40/100ths because we can multiply our numerator and our denominator by 10. Once we have it over 100, we can drop the denominator take the numerator and write it as a percent. Okay, 0.34, is 34 hundredths, so 34 over 100. Drop the denominator, write our numerator as a percent. Okay, so now if we look what we did, well, if we have 0.4, and to get to 40, I can take my decimal and I can move over to the right 2. If I add in a 0, I have 40%. 0.34, I'm going to take my decimal and move 2 to the right. So then I have 34, and I add my percent, I get 34%. So decimal to percent is the opposite. You're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. Okay? So if we have 0.98 or 98 hundredths, I move it 2 over to the right. So 98%, and we have to add our percent. 0.5, go over 2, add in a 0, so we have 50%. 0.5 makes sense because it's 1/2. 50% is also 1/2. 0.02, I go over to the right 2, I end up with 2%. 1.32 would be 132%. All right, that is all I have. So decimal to percent, we're going 2 to the right. Decimal to percent, 2 to the right. Percent to decimal, 2 to the left. Log into NICU and take your 4-7 NICU quiz. Have a super evening.